Welcome, listeners, to www.ironradio.org, the website and podcast for all things strength sports and sports nutrition. Thanks for listening. Hey, everybody. Without further ado, here is a bonus episode and simulcast of Iron Radio. This is a full-length episode that you will see occasionally here on the Nutrition Radio Network. Enjoy.
How, Dajé? We won again. This is good. But what is best in life?
Good morning, everybody. Another episode of Iron Radio. This is Phil Stevens. I am a powerlifter, Highland Games athlete, boxer, and strength coach.
Nice. This is Dr. Mike Nelson, owner of Extreme Human Performance, creator of the Flex Diet Cert and the PhysFlex Cert, and back home from Costa Rica and ISSN.
Cool.
And I'll be in Toronto next week, but home for a little bit.
This is Coach Durrell. I am the final Strength Guild gym, the last oasis of Strength Guild fitness facilities, and I am out of the KC area.
Right on. And I am Lonnie Lowry. I am a food industry consultant, adjunct professor, former competitive bodybuilder.
Sweet. So you got some news and some questions.
Well, yeah, let's do the listener question, because it's a good one and it's come up over the years. While Phil pulls that up, everybody, it's just it's the usual thing, right? Where you go to your doctor about your T levels, and he or she is skeptical that you're trying to optimize something or get jacked or who knows what.
Okay, it's a long one. Hey, Phil. Hope you're well. I have a question on the show, if you may. I think I'm getting hosed by my doctor, but I'm not experienced enough to know for certain. I had blood work done recently to check my free and total testosterone levels. My free testosterone came back as 135. With little bit I know, seemed extremely low to me. Apparently, there are two ways to measure for free testosterone. One is through blood work, and one is through a salivary test. I had blood work done. If I had a salivary test, then 135 would be normal range. With blood work, that number is extremely low. My doctor told me that it, in fact, was not low, and I was playing some sort of game. What he did not do was educate me on why he believed I was wrong. If you take blood test to measure free testosterone, the number is determined by way of nanograms per deciliter. If you take a salivary test, that number is determined through picogram per milliliter. What I'm wondering is if you could discuss both, discuss possibly on an episode what it looks like specifically. I don't want to think I'm right about something when in fact I don't know what I'm talking about. I would just like you guys to explain to me the different testings and if the only way to come with a number of 135 being normal range is through a salivary test. Thanks, man. So,
yeah, he's right that you're only going to get that with a salivary test. I think it's worth pointing out. Usually a physician's going to do a blood draw and look for total and free T. I mean, I always just remember total and free T. And again, this varies a lot, right? Age and individual. But I always just think about this like 300 to 1,000 scale, right? Of nanograms per deciliter. That's for young people. I'm under no delusion that in my 50s, I'm going to have a T level near 1,000. That's really high.
That's for total testosterone, right, Lonnie?
That's for total, right? That's for total. Free is going to be around 2% of that, right? Because most of it's bound up with like sex hormone binding globulin, a little bit from albumin, but that's not as much of a problem. In fact, you know what? I just had a flashback. The listener, you could go check out. I wrote an article called Testosterone Unleashed on T-Nation years ago. It's back in the day when we used to have lots of references and, evidence-based writing. So, You could check out Testosterone Unleashed. That'd be one thing. Yeah, free T, I don't see it being 135. Like he said, only a salivary test. Like salivary T is like 200 to 500, I think, picograms per mil. I've had my total and free T checked all the time by different doctors, including guys that I trust that are experts in men's health. And they always just do total and free T from a blood draw. Salivary T is a cool test because it sort of reflects what's thought to be tissue levels, and they're not as affected, all that stuff in your blood. But I've read weird stuff in some studies that sometimes it reflects serum levels really well, sometimes not. I just don't think a lot of docs are going to be doing that. I don't know. Mike, you work with like functional med docs and stuff. Are they looking at salivary as much as they are just free and total in the blood?
Yeah, I mean, the only ones I've worked with, and I have an MD, PhD, I keep on retainer for questions and stuff. Like, I would say almost all of them are looking at total testosterone first. Most of them will hopefully look at free testosterone also. But I would say the average doctor is probably still just looking at total blood levels of testosterone.
Mm-hmm.
The areas I see more salivary testosterone done, typically that's in an area where you can't pull bloods. So they're doing it as kind of a workaround to say, oh, hey, look, I measured your testosterone. And, you know, sometimes it may not be by an MD and they may be limited by licensure and state laws and that kind of stuff. So I don't know. I'd say vast majority of the time I see total testosterone and then also free testosterone.
Yeah, if the listener is at 900, I think he said, nanograms per deciliter, that's really high, bro. And I can see why the doc is like, dude, what are you after here? You know, because the guy that I go to, and I have for years to check these sorts of things, he's had clients. He's not violating HIPAA or anything. I just also know some of these other guys personally, and they are out to try to get their T levels jacked as high as they can, you know. And I'm, you know, but he knows me. I'm just like this 50-something dude that just doesn't want to fall apart, you know. But if it's that high, he's not gonna. If the total's that high, I've even had pushback on. Well, your total is within normal range, medium normal, but your free is too high, and you know you can manipulate the amount of free T you have. Like people who fast for a lot, if they undereat and they don't sleep and they drink alcohol, it messes with their total T levels and their SHBG, right? The binding protein that kind of ties up your testosterone. So they're going to look at total and free, most of them. A lot of them just total. The real pain in the ass is when you get a doctor who says, you know, on this 300 to 1,000 scale, you're 299. Now you're hypogonadal. You're 301. Nope, you're good to go. And then you're like, yeah, but dude, my whole life I've been 800. You know?
Yeah, that's how my first was. It was horrible.
And you know what? We said this years ago, and the listener, I mean, this is almost rude, but you can always fire your doc and get another opinion. I'm not saying go be a drug seeker, but you can fire a physician. The way the industry is set up is they kind of expect you to be somewhat subjugated. You wait for 45 minutes to get in, you know, you don't know as much as he or she does. But ultimately it's your money and your body. And if he doesn't like that, but you should know anywhere you go, if your total T is 900, if you're on TRT, they're going to pull you, off of it or down titrate it a little bit. Probably not pull you off of it, but reduce the number of pumps that you get a day or however you're doing it.
Yep.
Yeah, but that's my thought anyway.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's what I don't know. I looked into it a little bit from what I was seeing. He did get a blood test done. And from what I was reading, the scale that those two measurements are interchangeable. Like 35 to 155 PG per ml is the same as 3.5 to 15.5 NG per DL.
Yeah, it's a units nightmare, right?
Yeah,
that
it's a
you
conversion.
That basically what this says, even though he did a blood test, they show it in the PG ML scale, and it says that 35 to 155 is normal as far as a blood test goes. So I was like, you're right there, and you have to realize that it's only going to be, like you said, your free is always going to be a small percentage of the total. And when your total is 900, like you said, you're not. No doctor's going to be like, yep, need to give you more. You know? So.
Yeah, if we just guess that it's 2%, because it's going to vary like between 1% and 5%, right, of your total. But if we guess like 2%, which most people do, so his should be at 900 total. What's that? 18. He should be 18 nanograms per deciliter free T. That's also very high in the normal range. So,
So,
I hope that was helpful.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
The only other thing I would add too is if people in general are looking at doing TRT like we've discussed on the show before, again, I'm not pro or con. I always say go back to your doc and ask them, if you ever decide that you want to get off TRT, what are your options? Because I see, not this person in particular, but I just see too many people that come through that I see with very interesting lifestyle choices of, less sleep, under eating, training too hard, thinking that TRT is going to solve all their ills. And sometimes it can be very helpful, but sometimes it's not going to make up for all of your sins. Shocker. And then they want to get off a year later and may have some complications. So I always tell them just, be educated, talk to your doc, and then ask them that if you do try it, great. If you decide to get off, what are some of your options? And what I've noticed is most docs who are familiar with it will, be educated and give you some potential options, help educate you on the risks and rewards versus some other docs. There's some clinics that are just like, oh yeah, this will be great. It'll solve all your problems. Like, maybe not, just be educated.
Yeah. Well, I will say, yeah, that is a big problem from what I've seen with the advent of the local popularity of these clinics all around the nation. Many of them are just push. They want everybody on. And it's like, oh, okay, wait a minute. If I'm 25 years old and, like you said, it's low because of this and this and this, like, don't do that.
Yeah.
But I've dealt with people here recently, I still try and push, and I would love a listener to write in and tell me that they actually did this, because I've been trying to talk people into it for years, of going and getting blood work done when you're in your early 20s.
Yep.
Just to have a baseline of where you're at because of that. I mean, if for no other reason, in that scale, you look at that scale and it's like 300 to 1100 or whatever it is. Like, find out where you were when you were at your best. And then you could store that away and use that for when you're 45 or 50. When you have a reference zone.
At least it's a baseline. You got to talk to somebody who's going to take you seriously. And I feel like in this case, he's just getting poo-pooed. Like, you're just out to be jacked, bro. Look at your numbers. Yeah. Because I've spoken to physicians before, and I'm like, well, can I show you some of my old levels? No, I don't care about that.
Yeah.
Yes. One guy actually told me, he said, are you impotent? I said, no. Then that's not your problem. What?
Yeah.
Like, as if that's
that's exactly why I say, like, because you can't tell me that, I don't know, Mike Tyson had the same levels at 20 years old that, like, Urkel did. Like, let's find out where you were. And I'll tell everybody blatantly, half the battle of going on TRT is that first year or more where you have to work with your doctor, and, like, literally figure out what level's right for you.
Yeah.
Because I've seen some people take 50 milligrams a week, and their estrogen flies through the roof.
Yeah.
And then there's other guys that take 150 and they're fine. And I have to think that goes back to, where your body was naturally. Everybody's different. And if you were somebody that was walking around in your late 20s at 400 and we bring you to 900, your body's not going to enjoy that.
And it goes without saying, this usually goes to most guys, at least get blood work done once a year, for crying out loud. Like, the amount of people I talk to, I'm like, hey, bro, when's the last time you even got any blood work? They're like, I don't know. Like, do you even have a physician you talk to? No.
Yeah.
Let's start there.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I don't want to beat that one to death too much, but yeah, the truth is you can't really manipulate those too much either. Like, you can't be jacked all the time and then just go off and go in for your blood work, because they're going to look at other hormones and be like, no, you're playing games. You dropped your T, but these other ones are real high. Yeah, you just have to, be as straightforward as you can and find somebody who's going to be reasonable. Okay, do you want to do this? Do you guys want to? Do you have a specific topic, Phil, a lifting topic, or do you want me to talk about this nutrition thing?
Let's just talk about that, and I want to talk to you guys about the ISSN today, since it was like last weekend.
Oh, let's do that first.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it just happened. Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I always love the ISSN meeting. It is, I think, one of my buddies came up and he's like, that was pretty nerdy. And I think sometimes when it leads the public perception of, supplements and science. It's like, oh, that's not real science. These are people just trying to hawk, supplements. And yeah, there is sponsorship and stuff like that, of course, but it's like a lot of very legitimate scientists and legitimate research that's being done in a research format. So I think to some people, they kind of think that it's not really that way. I would say it's not to the extent of experimental biology, which is even more mechanistic and tons of rat studies. But a couple of things that kind of stood out to me was from a supplement ingredient standpoint, which is always interesting for listeners who enjoy those things. Last year, they had mentioned paraxanthine, which is a caffeine, basically derivative. Your body converts most of caffeine into paraxanthine and two other submetabolites. And that's being marketed as Infinity, and I probably got it wrong. So Infinity and Energy as a sort of a new crash-free stimulant. Right now, I think Muscle Tech has an exclusive on it, but I think that's coming up pretty soon. So you'll probably see that in a lot of new supplements. I've tried it and it was good. Like, it'll be super interesting to see how it compares against caffeine in terms of performance and a bunch of other stuff. It's pretty expensive right now as a raw ingredient. It's actually very expensive. But I think it's interesting. A couple studies on it, not too much data on that. The other one was basically a peptide called dileucine. We've heard of leucine helping for increasing muscle protein synthesis, or at least kickstarting that process. And they did a chronic training study with 2 grams of dileucine, I think, AM and post-training. And they did see an effect of, a little bit better muscle mass and some strength. Granted, the numbers were on the lower side. They did compare that to leucine or a placebo. And a pretty small dose, like just a couple of grams. So not a real high dose at all. So I think that might be interesting. That was talked about the previous year or two. I talked at length to Ralph Yeager about that. So it was cool to see actually some data on that. And I think we'll probably see more data on those 2 ingredients coming out, hopefully rather soon.
Oh, what other?
Oh, yeah. Honestly, and Mike and I did not look at this poster or talk to these researchers at the same time. It's interesting that one of my takeaways was also dileucine, right? Like, hey, these dipeptides there might be something there. Like, your gut doesn't just absorb single amino acids. If it's real expensive, it's kind of like what you said with paraxanthine versus caffeine. It's kind of bang for the buck. If I can take leucine at a fraction of the cost and just take more and still be a better off, then maybe I'll just go cheap. But it is interesting. Yeah, so I had some positive thoughts about that too. Here's a funny phrase that I heard. I've never heard this before. You guys probably have, but hallowed be thy gains. I thought that was funny. I wrote that in my notes along with everything else. You could tell that, I'm a meathead somewhere down deep because I'm writing stuff like that down in between all these data comments and stuff. Yeah, what else did I? There was some cool stuff. Was it like some microalgae extract stuff for muscle recovery? I think that caught my eye. There was some stuff about protein dosing, but honestly, it always comes back to if you're eating about 1 gram per pound, you're covering all your bases probably, even when you account for things. There's the usual stuff about how plant proteins are less digestible. You got to eat more. You got to mix them together. Although, honestly, chronic studies with plant proteins, they don't make them look as bad as some of the acute stuff, I think. Oh, here's one from Mike Nelson, psychedelics.
Oh, jeez.
This joker gave a talk on psychedelics. What was that about, Mike? Do you remember?
Yeah. It was on Saturday afternoon, and a lot of people were there for it, which was pretty impressive. And it was just basically an outline of what are some of the kind of framework of how you would view it. I mean, depending upon the timelines are always changing, but one of the last things that MAPS, Rick Doblin, was saying is that the MDMA for treatment of PTSD might be approved as soon as June of next year. Psilocybin might be approved as soon as December of next year for treatment of depression. So it's probably going to be here sooner than later, hopefully. Those datelines and timelines can always shift. And to me, I just get kind of nervous because as soon as it's here, like the media is going to go bonkers with it. And I think most fitness professionals, coaches of some form, because, there is so much mental health issues in general going on. Somebody knows somebody who has it or has it themselves. They're just going to be inundated with questions. And like all things, if you don't have some framework of that's going to be harder to figure out, where to go. Who do you refer them to? Is this thing good or bad? Should they check into it? So just trying to give people a framework of different type of compounds. How do they work? They do seem to increase brain neuroplasticity, so the ability for you to change your brain. One of the studies that was done with psilocybin compared it to a pretty popular SSRI, and within 2 sessions, it was substantially better. And those, which is a different model too, compared to, just take this drug every day. It's, 2 sessions and appeared to last for several months. Again, we don't have super long-term clinical data on that yet. But several months out, the effect appeared to stay. And then just kind of asking the question, then if that becomes approved, probably psychedelic supplements are not that far away. And you can find certain ones now that you can debate if they're legal or not legal. There's an extract from Amanita sescarius, the little red mushroom, that is legal because it hasn't been scheduled. I would not start there. It doesn't appear to have very positive effects, hasn't been used in any of the trials. Psilocybin in most states is still illegal. But if you look at the cannabis world, they had basically the Department of Agriculture ruling that allowed CBD to be legal. So now they've kind of exploited that into Delta 8 THC, Delta 10, THCA. There's all these other derivatives of THC that are kind of sort of quasi-legal. And I was even in Florida and staying with some friends, and they're like, oh yeah, we have these like gummies I use to sleep at night. I'm looking at the packaging. I'm like, well, this is sold as a supplement. They're like, oh yeah, they're a supplement. And I'm like, this is Delta 9 THC. Like, this is the main active component in, cannabis. And I'm like trying to figure out like, how the hell did they sell it? And then it took me forever to figure it out. And I realized, I'm like, oh shit, I looked at the weights. So on the side, it says contains less than 0.3% Delta 9 THC, which is what the law says. And then I looked at the total weight, and the gummies were like really big. And I went, oh shit. So they made a gummy at 0.3% THC, but they made the weight big enough to actually hit 10 milligrams of THC.
There you go.
Yeah.
Up the serving size.
Right. So I'm like, man, like there's going to be companies that are going to be very sneaky with all sorts of stuff coming, unfortunately, sooner than later, which we can then debate later if that's a good idea or bad idea. So, yeah, that's kind of summary of the talk.
That's brilliant. They're doing the opposite of the food industry.
Right, like literally.
It's like 25 calories per serving. There's 48 servings in this candy bar. They just did the opposite.
Right.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it was fun. I try to, change some topics and stuff. And I've been reading that research for, about 8+ years and stuff too. So it's, in terms of mental health, the people I know in that space too, the early pilot data on the use of psychedelics is extremely positive. And again, one of the downsides is, small trial size, working on FDA approval right now. Most of those drugs are all still Scheduled 1 illegal, which is the highest scheduling of drugs at a federal level. And then there's obviously a big issue with placebo. So I found a quote from one of the researchers who's like, no one's going to confuse 200 micrograms of LSD with a placebo. You have a blinding issue. And in one study, they used actually a drug to literally wipe their memory of the trial to try to eliminate some of the placebo effect. I don't know if that'll continue, but yeah, so kind of blinding issues are, one of the issues, trying to set up a randomized, quote unquote, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial.
It's like some Men in Black shit. They just wipe your brain.
Yeah.
Tim Zigafus's talk? Supplements not named creatine, caffeine, or protein that actually work?
Oh,
yeah, Mike and I, we got there late.
I got there Thursday night.
Yeah, so we missed a couple. And I did. He's got slides that you can you can go to the ISSN website and pull his slides. I briefly looked at them. It didn't look like anything earth-shattering, really.
Gotcha.
He was just kind of looking about, what's got the most evidence behind it. You know what, though, before we go to break, because I think we should start doing that again. There was two talks by industry guys. Daniel Fabricant, who's a big Washington, D.C. trade association guy, something he said, and I really think this is important to get out there through Iron Radio, is the dietary supplement industry is not unregulated. He's like, we've got to move beyond this, right? Because I keep thinking back to the Bigger, Stronger, Faster film, and people are laughing and they're encapsulating stuff on their kitchen table, and it's not like that. This is a regulated industry. Yes, DSHEA from back in, what was that, 94, Mike?
I think so, 92, 94.
Health Education Act. It does create freedom here in the U.S. that you don't see in some other countries. But let's get away from this idea that, my God, that supplements are unregulated. That is not true. And David Sandler later was given a talk on dietary supplements in general, and painting with a broad brush, he was saying, here's what's hot. Mushroom chemicals, if you will. He was saying, broad brush, about 600 milligram dose is what you need a lot of these mushroom extracts. But again, that's got to vary by the mushroom. Collagen is still big. Antioxidants, including lutein. And I'll tell you, I've seen that in food industry chat too. Lutein is very big for stuff like everything from visual processing, cognition, all that. Greens, phytochemicals, fibers. We're just talking on the other podcast that I do on all these different fibers. People have got to get their head around that fiber is not just one thing, and it's not just soluble versus insoluble. That ship has sailed. That's old school stuff. It's not necessarily wrong. It's just way grossly oversimplified. If you know what kind of fibers are prebiotic, for example, and feed the good guys in your guts, that's a big deal. It's a big, big deal. Some fibers provide more satiety, blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, nootropics, sort of like along the lines of what you were saying, Mike, with psychedelics, nootropics, all that kind of stuff remains hot as far as what David Sandler was talking about. So.
And he was saying energy drink market is going to almost predicted to double again by 2025.
Yeah, 9% year over year growth. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's face it. You don't. We talk about being old enough to see things come and go. What hasn't gone, it just came and stayed, is stimulants. Stimulants sell. They just do.
Yeah.
Pre-workout types of stuff. All right. If it's okay with you guys, we'll go to break, and then we'll come back and we'll look at this study on how fast you eat and what that does to you. Yep. Hey, everybody. Iron Radio is back, and in an expanded way. What can you expect? Well, first, you can get it simulcast every week on the nutritionradio.org network, as well as on the original podcast. It'll appear regularly on iTunes, Spotify, and all your favorite podcasting sites. We have a new Iron Radio / Nutrition Radio Facebook page as well. Please check us out. We're even backed up on YouTube. Second, please tell your friends who are longtime loyal listeners that they may see emails that share just the episode link and the show notes. This is a new thing, and we hope it will build community. Third, if you were a supporting member in the past, we may prompt you to resume through PayPal, but we will confirm each and every donor before reinstating that membership category. We'll never just restart your $4 auto payments without agreement from you. And of course, we will accept new members moving forward as well. Starting back slowly and honorably is the goal. And lastly, expect the sister show Nutrition Radio to expand into once weekly 45 to 60 minute episodes with guest co-hosts, covering the same nerdy nutrition news that's been broadcast for a few months now in daily 10-minute clips. We hope that an expanded presence will get you the news, education, banter, and guests that's made Iron Radio's community so loyal from the start. You are appreciated. All right, everybody, welcome back to Iron Radio. We're going to talk about eating pace, eating rate, and how that affects your total intake, because I'm immediately looking at this in a Phil Stevens kind of way. Like, how can I do this backwards? Like, you know, to eat real slow, to eat less.
I mean, I've definitely used it, and I'll say most often it's the eating faster for people. Who was the guy that wrote the article for Elite FTS about putting the whole quart of oil on your pizza? I can't remember who it was.
I thought it was Dave Tate. It was somebody that told Dave Tate to do that.
It was somebody else.
Dave Tate. Yeah.
But basically, yeah, you have to beat the full. You know, like you have to win. Like, you need to attack it, because, you know, when you slow down and eat, all of a sudden you're going to get full off of a little bit of food. And so I'd say I've used it both ways, getting people to slow down if they want to lose some weight. But most often my attention has been towards people is, you know, you just need to get in there, basically eat as hard as you train, you know,
eat
like
hard.
It's going up. Yeah. Like every fucking meal is max effort.
Yeah.
So, and it's just the way it has to be.
This is like t-shirt worthy. On the front, eat hard. On the back, beat the full. And, let me just share a couple of comments here, and then you guys obviously have already thought about this stuff a lot. I don't think we've ever addressed this directly over the years on podcasts, like specifically. So. This is a systematic review, meta-analysis examining the effect of eating rate on energy intake and hunger. This is from Robinson et al., American Journal of Clinical Nutrition in 2014. So why am I bringing it up now? It was recently on a podcast, one of the huge podcasts. They were talking about eating rate. Here's just a couple of poll comments that I highlighted out of this article. Our main objective was to examine how experimentally manipulated differences in eating rate influence concurrent energy intake and subjective hunger ratings. 22 studies were eligible for inclusion. So listeners, I'm sure you realize science has progressed to the point that you're seeing tons of not just individual studies to talk about, but meta-analyses, studies of other studies, and then Mike's probably thinking already, and even umbrella analyses of meta-analyses. So studies of other studies of other studies. So tons of data here. It says evidence indicates that slower eating rate was associated with lower energy intake in comparison with faster eating. Subgroup analysis indicated the effect was consistent regardless of the type of manipulation used to alter the eating rate. So, you know, they might do soft versus hard food, or, I don't know, a timer or whatever it might be. Here's what caught my eye. There was no significant relation between eating rate and hunger at the end of the meal or up to 3.5 hours later. In other words, you don't compensate later. That's fascinating to me, because I would think that you would probably, you know, people love, Mike knows this better than I do probably, homeostasis, the human body, you love to eat about the same number of calories every day, but this sounds like you can manipulate this. It says observational studies, which, you know, they try to do a big meta-analysis. The observational studies are fraught with issues because, you know, you end up with non-cause and effect. Experimental direct manipulations, also mixed results. They say the mechanisms are a couple of things. The speed of eating and the frequency of chewing could influence various satiety hormones. So in other words, like what you were saying, Phil, if you eat slowly, eventually things get into your duodenum, right? The first stage of your intestine, and that sends out like this hormonal cascade of, hey, we're full. So if you want to gain weight, you want to beat that. You know, in grad school, we called that the duodenal reflex, and we would try to eat huge amounts of food in under 20 minutes. There's not a magic number there because of gastric emptying and all that, but it says a probable mechanism by which eating rate may affect intake is through the magnitude, that is the duration and the intensity of oral exposure to taste. So it's a sensory thing. Near the end, it says a recent study did find that slower eating rate was associated with reduced food intake during that meal, and compensation did not occur during other meals of the day. And then they kind of wrap up in the conclusion area. It says most studies reviewed sampled predominantly healthy weight young adults. because again, we have to think about this too, right? We're talking about morbidly obese or healthy weight young adults. Most of these were healthy weight young adults, although some studies, the mean sample BMI, their body mass index, was in the overweight range. Well, who isn't, right?
Yeah,
I mean, in other words, upper 20s, 25 to, let's say, 30-ish. But yeah, this got me thinking, if you don't compensate later, this makes it sound like if you do eat hard and beat the full, I swear I'm going to make a t-shirt, then you're going to get away with it. Like, you're not going to be so full later that you can't possibly, shove another bite in.
Yeah.
But yeah, manipulating the pace, other than try to eat real fast when we were trying to gain weight, you don't have to be a scientist to know. I'm just going to shovel food as fast as I can, before I get full. But, and again, it doesn't say that all studies said there's no compensation later. I'm sure there's probably some.
Yeah.
But by and large, it seems to be this, the taste thing, the sensory thing. Yeah, so I know you've done that, Phil.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, it's just like I've talked to people with, like I said, going in reverse. Like, but I really like my cookies or whatnot. And literally you can get someone a bite of a cookie or the whole cookie. And taste-wise and like satisfaction-wise, it's essentially the same thing. It's just a bigger bite. So when you're looking to gain weight, we just need to cram 4 cookies in. Or vice versa. And then the other big one is, I'd love to see one of these studies extrapolated over time, because the people that are punching more in and eating like max effort, like they're got to be cramming more food in, and you take that over time and essentially stretching your stomach and the ability to cram even more, I would think over time would become possible. Like it's a trained skill is what I'm getting at. Like eating, look at the competitive eaters and things. I mean, at some point, it's a trained skill to gain weight. And it was one of the hardest things for me to do. Like, was going from 165 to 290. It was like I had to eat like it was my job. And not only the whole try and beat the full, but then once the full was gone, doing that again. Like, most people don't understand. Like, they want to eat when they're hungry. And when you're looking to gain weight, you have to eat when you're not full.
Yeah.
If I'm not full, okay, it's time to fill the tank up again. So
yeah, liquids, oils. The point about Dave Tate was a good one. High calorie, 9 calories per gram. One of the things that I want to know about this, and I didn't see it in this particular paper, is body composition. Right?
Yeah.
When you overconsume, like, do waist girth measurements over time. You're like, oh, it's all coming around his waist. With that rapid eating. I don't think that's true. We've explored that in years past, right? That a certain percentage of weight gain is lean mass, even if you don't lift when you overeat. So I got to think it's still advantageous. I was just curious what you guys did with this whole pacing.
Yeah, and I've done the opposite with clients who are trying to lose weight. Like, I actually purposely, don't, all the stuff you've heard before. Like, just try to enjoy your food. Don't eat in front of the TV. For God's sake, don't eat when you're scrolling through TikTok on your phone or whatever the hell you're doing. Like, just sit down. I've even had people, like, I try to do this. I did this for breakfast the other day. Just go sit outside. Like, get some sun exposure. Look at trees. Like, relax. Like, eat slow. Like, you're not, and especially with trainers, which I understand. Like, you've got a client here, a client there. And I've lost track of how many trainers I've worked with now who had just massive digestion issues, and all we did is just like move their schedule around a little bit so they could eat without having to cram all their food in like 3 minutes before their next client. So simple things like that, chew your food, all that helps. And like what Phil was saying on the opposite side, like one of the first guys I ever met years and years ago when I started lifting, I was trying to gain weight because I was, 156 pound eel-shaped rake at like 6'3". And he looked at me and he's like, don't taste your food, just eat it. I was like, what? He's like, no, literally, don't try to taste your food. You just eat more of the food. Like, oh, okay.
Yeah, that's in line with what we just read, isn't it?
Right.
The sensory thing.
Yep.
Yeah. I would say I haven't given any like specific advice besides I generally give blanket advice like take your time, don't eat in front of just don't eat distracted.
Yeah.
Screens or otherwise, or like even like listening to something for most people. But I have never, because most of the people who need to gain weight that I work with are like kids. And I mean, you got to do just anything to get them to understand what that process is in the first place. Like, they're like, oh, is 2 eggs enough? You're like, no, like 2 dozen eggs is enough. You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. And just like getting them to like have the concept in their mind first. And then it's like, their eyes are big at first, but then they, get it over time. So I've never had it where I've like had someone who was past that point, but then needed like more specific advice on that. So usually it's kids, and like once they start eating, it's like, then you gotta like stop them at some point. So it's usually the same advice for them, but yeah, normally it just kind of depends, but I haven't given any specific advice. I might try that with, I'll do another nutrition cut for some of my clients here pretty soon, and then manipulate some of the just basic variables on that. You see how it goes?
Jarrell, even when I dieted really hard, I was just, well, let's face it, you're highly motivated when you're going to get on stage in front of lots of people in your underwear. but I never tried to eat slowly. I would just eat my little portion, my 2 chicken breasts and 1 yam or whatever I had measured out. And then just kind of, grin and bear it, and use discipline. But I never tried to eat it more slowly per se. Maybe that would have made things less difficult for me. I don't know.
How often did you eat?
Oh, man. Well, ideally, and I think Mike's on the same page of this, the whole protein spacing thing, I would try to eat 4 times a day, in very measured amount, and over the course of 20 weeks, the protein levels go up, if anything, and the carb levels, progressively come down. So what you're eating in each meal is different. I mean, by the end, I'm eating almost just chicken, a little bit of green beans or broccoli,
Who wants to slowly eat a dry ass chicken breast and some broccoli?
Yeah, amen, brother. Maybe that's why. It's a good point. Yeah, I'm going to savor this. There is no sensory experience in boiled potatoes and boiled chicken.
If you slow somebody down with like a platter of Twinkies, maybe they won't eat 12.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Maybe that's why I never even thought.
Third of that dry ass chicken.
Right.
That.
Yeah, it's like your hormones, your nervous system, all this kind of gut-brain axis. It's like, Lonnie, what are you trying to manipulate the sensory intensity? Because there is no sensory.
You've won.
There's nothing happening here. It's bland. It's glue. Yeah. It's paper.
So, yeah, that boils down to choices. Whereas, like nobody ever, like Thanksgiving dinner. Like, how many times are people undoing buttons because they just, oh my God. So that never happened at a all-you-can-eat dry-ass chicken breast convention.
Right.
No buttons being popped open. So.
Well, and it's the kind of thing you always say, Phil, as well, which is, it's population specificity. Like, you're not going to see this in reverse. Like, how can we do this to try to force feed in bodybuilders or powerlifters, because we want maximum calorie load and, and that kind of stuff. But we need to address the weight gain stuff. I feel like if we don't, it doesn't get enough attention, like in most like medical type clinical or science circles. Yeah, weight gain, but usually weight gain is for stuff like cancer wasting patients and that kind of stuff. Yes, athletes want to gain weight, but I don't think it gets a ton of attention. And I'm thinking the opposite.
The modern food market is built for fast, high consumption. And that's where my argument that I've always said is like, yeah, today is like our fattest society in the world, but it's also the best for extreme athletes because of the food we have access to.
Yeah.
Like 200 years ago, you couldn't like quickly plow through like chewing on a buffalo leg. You had to fucking eat slow. You had to chew that son of a bitch
Connective tissue.
And yeah, I mean, and now, you grab a bag of chips and a, 300 calorie soda, and you can have, 1,000 calories in 30 seconds. That just wasn't possible. So maybe we do need to, like the food of old, like forced you to slow down and eat dinner.
And you had to expend calories just to go freaking get it.
Yes, yeah, you had to expend the calories to clean it and go get it. And now, like, Like if I wanted to have, I could have 10,000 calories crammed in 5 minutes if I wanted to, just drinking it. And, that wasn't possible back in the day. So,
It's a good point. When I first heard that guys like Michael Phelps, the swimmer for you meatheads out there who don't care, I eat 12,000 calories a day. My first thought was bullshit. At least not if it's a variety of food, if there's any semblance of regular intake. But then you think about, what is this? It's, you could shovel in a couple of Big Macs and man, you're adding calories fast. Then you drink down, a bunch of just raw sugary pop or weight gainers or whatever. Yeah. In today's modern soft food world, I mean, I read that in that paper a little bit. One of the manipulations is softer foods. Well, my God, you could eat most of what's on the McDonald's menu without teeth. You really can.
Yeah, exactly. And it's highly loaded in calories.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they've made it easy. There's a reason the population is obese.
No, that's right. It's capitalism. And most of what I see in today's world is capitalism gone bad, late stage capitalism gone bad. It's because everything is about a buck. It's about branding and making money. And, you can say, oh, you should worry about the health of the population. Do you really think the food industry is going to do that? Mike and I have been to IFT. We know what these guys are trying to do in the background. They want sales, man.
Yeah. And the faster they make it, it's quickly edible. You're able to cram in, it digests fast. So guess what? You need more.
Right. It's all it's good marketing, I guess is what I'm saying. I'm not saying I'm completely against capitalism. I think late stage capitalism where everything gets commoditized makes me roll my eyes. But look at the seats in McDonald's, how they, for the longest time, are fast food, soft food, shovel, and then your butt gets uncomfortable on the hard plastic seat and you leave. Move them out like an assembly line,
Yep. All right. Well, we can call it there.
Yeah, sounds good. That's fun discussion. Like I said, we've never talked. I don't think we've ever talked about that at great length before and how it applies. It's a good point, Phil, about the blandness of competition diets. It wouldn't help me anyway. You're right. It wouldn't help me anyway.
Yeah. I mean, you needed to turn on something to listen to while you eat to distract you from how bad it is.
Right. Pure utility. Yeah. Zero pleasure for, at least the last 10 or 15 weeks out of the 20. Zero pleasure. There was no sensory input.
Nope. None. No.
All right, guys.
All right, guys. Well, have a good one.
All right.
Bye.
Iron Radio is accepting donations. If you like what we do, the professors, the scientists, the bodybuilding show promoters, the athletes themselves in powerlifting and bodybuilding, please consider making a donation. We also are accepting supporting members. So for $4 a month, which is frankly less than the bank sneaks out of your account in fees, you can step up and support a form of sort of public radio for the bodybuilding and powerlifting and strength community. The Iron Radio podcast and all of the audio on ironradio.org is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, it's important to check with your physician. Also seek the help of registered dietitians, athletic trainers, and qualified exercise physiologists in order to make the progress that you need.